have to be predicted. It is pure
Right.
and finds its own way like water flowing to the sea. So the main question coming from this line of thought would be the following. Are the bots changing the way we interact with the future? Do they exist indeed to change the way we interact with the future? That's that kind of line of question coming from a seer to you. End of question.
Yeah, I don't know that I could actually answer that in the sense that means that I must step outside of myself and my process and view it from what universe would want. And all I can say is that trying to anticipate the intent of universe is very difficult. I believe that the question is sound, and I believe that some of the elements of the question are quite accurate. That is to say, I believe that we are indeed changing how we interact with the future. If we wanted to stop and have a discussion about the mundane for a second, we need to understand that the reason that we don't see a predictive future that's all birds singing, sun coming out, and nice things has to do with the way in which I started this work. It was easier for me to assign a value to negative language because there was much more of it to be found. Now, so I just was lazy in that respect, and it was easier to assign negative emotions because they're more easily seen. We, in fact, in our culture here in the West, and particularly in the United States, have this issue of, and particularly with males, have this issue of the inability to express those nice thoughts because they are somehow seen unmale-like and not in the testosterone camp, if you will. So there is just less of it to find. And even when one finds it, it is often shielded and guarded by these inhibitions that are placed on the individual human. Now, I think that it's quite accurate to say that indeed the nature of the work as a whole certainly is tapping into an area that is beyond the predictive set. And let me explain that real quickly. As I get into the detail levels and look at the actual details from which we can forecast, that would appear to be, say, an image from a film, from a video being shown on a screen. The underlying work, though, that reaches into the archetypes, it is my feeling that the archetypes exist on the other side of the screen upon which the details appear. And so the archetypes exist, and it is the expression of those archetypes that we are seeing on the detail level from which the predictions are made. This is an important distinction because it allows us then to think about the archetypes themselves existing beyond our ability to reach out and touch them. Much in the same way that one takes a pulse at a wrist in order to determine the health of the heart and the circulatory system, but so you're not actually sensing the heart and you're not actually touching the circulatory system itself, but are in fact looking at an indicator at a more surface level. That's the way I view the nature of the work. End of statement.
Thank you very much. So one more question before I hand the microphone to my friend Kieran, who has a couple of very interesting lines of thought. There was a question, again a line of thought question, coming from a friend who reads us, who asked if is there evidence of people having a greatly increased psychic ability in the very near future, let's say within the next 2 years until 2011. Clif had been talking about the whole replicator thing, and that got me thinking, is what this man wrote to us. What if instead of technology we are co-creating reality ourselves so that money or resources have less value in the future? Humans seem to have an innate ability to do things without using technology, unlike, say, certain ETs or aliens. So, are we just co-creating reality instantly in the future without any technology? That's the line of question. End of statement.
That's a very interesting question. I'm not sure I can provide anything in the way of a definitive answer, but I can say that there appears in our data an amorphous area that could describe such a situation. However, it could also describe the appearance within our midst of actual devices that would achieve the same thing. So what we're seeing is a future in which the area that I called the new electrics could easily have been redefined under the new psychic ability, so to speak. But basically, the issue comes down to my engineering-bound mind. And in doing the analysis with that mind, I came across the idea from my own personal experience that the following is true. It is possible to use your psychic ability to affect reality, that is to say, manifesting circumstances in matter. I have personally done this, and I know that the effect can be long-lasting and perhaps permanent. But I also know that the amount of energy and the amount of effort in doing so is going to be an issue involved in the manifestation of matter. And let me explain. I had run across a series of experiences and had these experiences that one might say are on the enlightenment path. And if one followed the idea of the 9 experiences before nirvana, then I've had perhaps 4 or 5 of such experiences. And in the process, I came across the ability to alter my own body with mental thought. I had been suffering a 20-year bout with an incurable skin disease called eczema, and I was able to alter within my consciousness the conditions for the manifesting of that disease condition, and the disease left. But let me be very clear about this. In that process, I went through 30 days of having to apply that energy continuously for 30 days. On every other thought, I had to get in and apply that energy towards the curing of that disease. So it was not this idea of an instantaneous cure where you pass your hand over and as by magic, there it is. This was, in fact, the other way. This was something that had to be worked at. Now, this was done in, I believe, 2001 I did that, or 2002. In any event, I've had no reoccurrence of the condition and have no worries about that condition reoccurring ever again. I have permanently altered the template from which the matter manifests that is in my body. And I know that that template will not revert to that disease condition. But, that having been said, let me point out, if one were to attempt to alter the template of the air in front of them on a table such that a full pint of Guinness would appear, you would have to have a considerable amount of energy to first get that pint of Guinness to appear. And then, in order to manifest it continuously, continuous energy would have to be applied. So the idea of co-creation, it makes sense, but you must understand that this is a very structured, orderly universe, and it will not occur by a single thought and thereafter stay. One must work with the templates either through their psychic ability with a considerable amount of physical energy, or one must find some mechanism that would allow that energy to be tapped from universe, cycled back through your thoughts or template altering software to allow universe to be recreated. And so you would need a device to maintain that level of energy to keep that pint of Guinness there until you could drink it.
If there is a dimensional change ahead or a metamorphosis, would it be detectable in 3D thought patterns? If the jump was so great, it may not be possible to pick up a future that vibrates higher than this one, for want of a better description. It may be off the radar, beyond polarity or time, for example. Also, the future that we're picking up could be the future of those that do not choose to metamorph, vibrate higher, ascend, evolve, choose the better timelines, however you want to put it. This would chime with what the people, channels or ninth dimensional Pleiadians and others, and all sorts of sort of esoteric information coming in, say about higher dimensional beings seeing down, but lower dimensional ones not seeing up. I sort of feel this is an allegorical. You know, the words don't do it justice, but that's all we have. So ergo, in 3D, we cannot reveal higher future realities by this method, as the mindset is that we're mining here is base 3D. So we're seeing particularly darkly. End of question.
I would agree with you. Our work would seem to reinforce this idea that time is basically an element, one of the 66,000 aspects of the manifestation of these individual particles of matter. And it makes sense that we would not be able to see vibrational levels that are higher than us. So we are trapped by the limitations of our mind, which might be easily referenced as, say, 40 frames per second, the amount of frames it takes to make pictures into the appearance of a moving image. And so say that our minds indeed only can work at the 40 frames a second, and it would make sense then that our WebBot technology approach would pick up whatever the manifesting matter is spewing out and not anything on the other side of that. And in that sense, it certainly is limited. Now, beyond that, I have to say that there appears to be discontinuities in that line of thought within the actual data itself that hints at a greater level of vibrational awareness in those that are putting out the data which we pick up. That's a little bit convoluted, but let me restate it another way. Humans are probably antennae that are picking up not only the 40 frames per second image of manifesting matter, but some level beyond that that will vary by individuals. And that some level beyond that sensation for some individuals might cause mental illness that we might classify as, say, schizophrenia, because the 40 frames a second mind and the social infrastructure around that mind do not allow that individual to express or understand what they're feeling in an appropriate way, so it comes out as an inappropriate mental illness in matter here. Now, that understanding as a base, we have to say that there's some hints that indeed there is something very large coming. An emotional shift or vibrational change is indeed forecast within our work, but of course the words don't do it justice. And in fact, we know that there is a level of information that is hidden from us but might be attempting to be expressed because we get strange word combinations that almost make sense. They're not anything that would usually be seen or heard in discussions, but nonetheless these multiplicity of seemingly divergent thoughts joined together in our data are almost Zen koan-like, in the sense that there's a feeling that we get from reading them that there's a level of meaning behind them that we just can't quite grasp. So I would agree with that statement, that indeed there is this level of something happening beyond our data, and we can only see so far. And we do have a hint of that. Now, on the other side of that, the idea of a vast vibrational shift that would have some people shift into another timeline and so forth always brings me back to the engineering mind again, where I say, while that indeed may be so, let us not lose sight of the fact that any shift out of 3D matter means death, at least of the 3D body that is left behind, because there's no point in carrying forward into a higher level of vibration a lower level vibratory matter created kind of thing. So in other words, if you're going to go into your ethereal body or any of the energetic bodies above the material world, you're not going to be dragging along this three-dimensional body with its aches and pains and its attachment to 3D material world. So I don't see how one can occur without the other, and people need to understand this. That I've seen a lot of people talk on the internet about ascension and the idea of a vast vibrational shift that will leave some people behind on the planet, and I suggest that all people, in the sense of manifesting corpse, will be left behind, even if the consciousness goes elsewhere. End of statement.
Interesting, thank you. I'll get on with the second question. Now we're much closer to the event, in inverted commas. Do you have a view on Terence McKenna and his interesting time wave zero research? End of question.
Oh, I love Terence McKenna. I've got an entire set of interviews from one of the radio